Hi there, this is Steve Holmes, Creative Director of Energy Design in San Francisco, welcoming you to another cool video tutorial here on Artbeats.com. Now, if you've logged onto the Artbeats website recently, you may have noticed a brand new collection entitled Lower Thirds HD, which contains 27 beautiful high-definition lower third designs with animated openers and seamless loops, all designed and created right here in the Energy Design Studio. Now, while the design, animation, layering, and looping processes can be more time-consuming to perfect, it's actually possible to create beautiful and colorful lower thirds in a fraction of the time with just a few clips and some solid After Effects techniques. Now, up here in my project panel, you can see I've imported 3 Artbeats clips already from Artbeats.com, and they're from 2 different collections. We've got Cyber Journeys and Line Elements, both HD. If I go ahead and click on them, you can see that they are full 1920 by 1080 resolution at 29.97 frames a second. Now, this first one is 10 seconds in length, but if I look at the other 2, you see that they do have different lengths, but they are all longer than 10. So 10 seconds is going to be our timeline. The other 2, we can adjust them, time stretch them so that they are also 10 seconds in length. So we're going to create a brand new composition. I'm going to go ahead and press Command N or Control N on the PC to bring up the new comp dialog box, and I'll go ahead and name this one Lower Third Design. I'm going to use the HDV HDTV preset of 720, 1280 by 720, 29.97 frames a second, and a duration of precisely 10 seconds. The background color, you can leave that as it is. We're going to be working with transparency here, so black is usually a good color to work with in that scenario. Now, go ahead and click OK, and if I'm zoomed down at 50% and I hit the apostrophe key, I can turn on the safe areas, because this gives us an idea of our content area for the design. We don't want to design a lower third that could potentially disappear off the lower left-hand side. So what I'm going to do is simply divide my screen into thirds and then use guides to isolate the area in which we create the design. So Command R or Control R on the PC will pull up the rulers, and I'm just going to go up to 100% zoom and scroll down to the lower left hand side here. Okay, now basically the height of 720 here divided by 3 is 240 pixels, so 2 of those would make 480. If I drag a guide down here, we can pull it down. You see the rulers on the left hand side. I'm going to drop that to 480. So this is now taken the top 2/3 and left the bottom third here for us to work in. And what I'll also do, just to be on the safe side, is drag another guide down here and align it onto that bottom safe area. And this basically decides, well, this is where our design should fit safely. We can leave space here, and then the rest of the guidelines decide where the elements should fall safely. So all type above this area, and this kind of gives us like a double edge here. If I use this distance up here, we could create a couple of bars that sort of isolate and contain the main lower third as we move on. So if I just zoom back down there, turn off the rulers, turn off the safe areas, you can now see that we've got these guides locked into place that give us our design area of the lower third. Now, I'm also going to make sure that under the view menu that snap to guides is turned on, because we will use that later on. And if you want to, you can go ahead and choose lock guides as well so that they can't accidentally be moved. So let's bring in the main background clip now and start getting this design created. This clip right here, CJ108H, I'm just going to open that so you can see it in full screen. This is from the Cyber Journeys HD collection. This is actually a clip I've used many times in different types of backgrounds for DVDs and interstitial screens, and I've also used it for lower third design, so I think this is a good example. So what I'm going to do is click and drag it down into the timeline at 0 seconds, and I could go ahead and fit to screen to shrink it the way down into the corner there. What I'm going to do is just zoom up, turn on the safe areas again so we can work in that lower left hand side. But I think this position's very slightly offset there, so I'm just going to go down to the scale value here by hitting the S key and just nudge it up to a nice round 70%. And then what I can do is just move it across so we make sure we have enough overlap on the right hand side, just in case we want the lower third to go all the way to the right, which I don't think we will, but we can change it later. And then I'll just nudge this down a little bit so we can sort of center this in this kind of safe area we've defined here. So if I just quickly scrub through there, you can see that this central sort of double prism of crystal is our focal point here on the left hand side. So something like that will do. And then what we can do is once again turn off the safe area so we can see the element more clearly. And then whilst I'm here, I also want to change the color at this point. There's one effect I like to use in this instance, which is CC Toner. It's very, very straightforward. Just go up to the effect menu, let's go down to color correction and choose CC Toner. And we have 3 simple controls for highlights, midtones, and shadows. Midtones is usually the only one you need to adjust. In this case, that's what we're going to do. Go ahead and click on the color swatch, and let's use a very simple color here. I'm going to go 200 on red, 255 on green, and 0 on blue. And that gives us this wonderful lime green effect, and I think that just immediately changes the overall look of this. You know, it really sort of highlights this wonderful clear crystal we've got. Now, to push the design a little further, what I'm also going to do is apply some glow to this. So once again, back up to the effects, let's go down to stylize, and this time come down and choose glow. Now, the initial effect it gives is somewhat disconcerting sometimes, and that's really just because we have some default settings that we need to tweak. Usually the most important one is the glow colors. It's making a glow basically from the original greens and everything else. What I like to do is come down here and choose A and B colors and make sure that both A and B are set to white. Okay, so then that just gives us a really nice shiny white glow without interference from any other color sources. Now we can then adjust these 3 values for the glow threshold, radius, and intensity to make it more or less strong. Okay, so I'm going to push the threshold up to around 100. Okay, so that we get a nice sharp highlight, and then we can adjust the radius to give us a little bit more coverage, a little bit more softness. So somewhere around 30, 35, something like that. And then feel free to adjust the glow intensity as well. I'm going to pull this up to, I don't know, about 1.4, 1.5, not too heavy. But now as you scrub through the timeline, you see these wonderful areas of white highlight. It's very, very reflective. If you turn off the glow, you can see the difference. Okay, and just by using those A and B colors set to white, we really do get this wonderful, nice, shiny highlight combined with this lime green background. I think, you know, initially we've got a fantastic start here to, you know, the overall lower third. So now I can add another layer of detail to this. Let's go back to the beginning of the timeline, come over to the project panel and take a look at our next clip. I'm going to go ahead and use this one, LNE115H2. This is in the Line Elements HD collection. Again, if I show you this full screen, you can see this wonderful rendering of these 3D curved lines just spiraling around. Again, a seamless loop, but it's 12 seconds in length, so we're going to have to play around a bit with the overall length here to bring it down to 10 seconds, and then also adjust its transparency. So just go ahead, drag it down into the timeline and place it at the top above the other clip, and just simply fit the entire window. Okay, and as I said, the length is going beyond the length of our timeline, and we do want it to be the same length, so if we decide to loop this later on, we can simply double the overall timeline. So I'm going to come down here to the lower left of our timeline and click the time stretch options. We'll pull out here and we can see the overall duration of this clip. Go ahead and click on there and just set the finished duration to exactly 10 seconds. Okay, now if I hit the end key and the home key, you can see that we've got our 1 frame apart, so that's where your seamless loop would come in. So the transparency is easy to do. I'm just going to go ahead and close down the time stretch, give ourselves a bit more room. Let's go up to the effect menu and use some very default settings here. You've probably seen these in other tutorials that I've done in the past. I'm going to go down to channel and use shift channels. Okay, and this allows us to create an alpha channel from one of the channels existing in the image. Well, because the image is black and white, really we've only got the luminance to play with. If you go ahead and choose that, it will use the light and dark values of the layer in order to create its own transparency. Now you can also see some of the original background color of the shot still left in here despite the shift channel function. So I'm just going to go up to the effects, go down to channel and tell it to remove color matting, and that will restore the original brightness. Now I'm just going to change the blending mode down here in the timeline. I'm going to change this to an add mode and then go into the opacity for the layer by hitting T on the keyboard and bring this down to around about 30 or so %. What I can then do to sort of boost these levels is simply select the layer and Command D or Control D on the PC to duplicate it. It's sometimes easier to do these layers as duplicates with blending modes and smaller amounts of transparency than it is to do one single layer and just play around with 0 to 100. You just have a little bit more control. So by duplicating these 2 layers, I think we get a really nice effect here where these areas are overlapping. Okay, now we're going to work on a light burst that works over here on the left hand side and sort of isolates an area that could be used for overlaying the logo of the channel or something like that. So over here in the project panel, I'm going to go to our third clip. This is also from the Line Elements HD collection, and you can see this one is really cool. It's all based around the center as opposed to sort of a varying spiral like we had a second ago, and it does go off the top and the bottom, but that's not a problem because we can mask it and feather it. Now we're going to use this in a different composition because it's just going to make masking and transparency a little bit easier as we move further down through the project. So once again, I'm just going to create a new composition, and I'm going to call this one Sparkle. It's going to be exactly the same size, frame rate, and duration as the rest of our projects, and indeed the background color as well. So go ahead and click OK, and once again I'll just zoom down here, and in this one I'm going to take our clip and just drag it down into the new timeline and scale it to fit the entire size, so we make sure that we use all of the pixels. And don't forget, you're basically scaling it down to around 67%, so we're actually getting more detail out of those wonderful high definition clips. Now what I want to do here is remove the background. Okay, we want to make sure that these light areas, these light beams, are completely transparent through here, so that when we overlay it onto our lower third design we can see our green panel through there. Okay, so we're going to apply a few different effects here. Before we do that, do make sure we have a timeline that's 10 seconds long. Remember that our clip is not. If we come back over here to the project panel, you can see it's 13 seconds and 10 frames. So once again, just go to time stretch, go to the duration, and make sure that our final length is exactly 10 seconds. That's a 75% stretch. Alright, close that back up. What we're going to do now is drain the color out of this and get the transparency. So I'm going to come up to the effects, go down to color correction, and choose hue and saturation. Now this one's a very easy effect. Simply drag the saturation down so we lose all of the color. This leaves us with black and white. Remember, when we use the shift channels function, luminance is very easy. If we've got no color, it gives us a really nice strong channel. So that's a good start. However, I do wish to boost that a little more. I'm going to go up to the effects for this, go down to color correction again, and choose levels this time. So just like you would in Photoshop, it's going to allow you to boost the white and darken the black and just sort of fine tune how much of this information is left. So I'm going to take the input black area here and maybe darken this down to around 20 or something like that. Input white we can drag to the left. You see the more that you do so, you get this wonderful highlight here in the center. You can go a little too far on it, but it's all adjustable. That's the nice thing. We're doing this inside a pre-comp. If you look at the finished result and it's just too stark in contrast for you, just come over here and adjust the values. It's very, very easy. And of course we can adjust the gamma in here to either increase or decrease the amount of detail. So I'm actually going to go a little bit to the left to around, I don't know, 1.5 or something like that. Now to make this transparent on the background, we use exactly the same technique as we did a second ago, the shift channels and the remove color matting, to make sure that the gray that appears around the edge doesn't stay there. We can actually remove it and leave full white. Well, seeing as we've already got it in the other composition, we may as well reuse it. I'm going to come down here to one of our overlaid clips, okay, and in the effect controls, there's our shift channels. I'm going to hold down the shift key and select both of those, and Command C or Control C on the PC to copy those into memory. If we come back over to our new Sparkle one now, select the clip and paste, those two effects are now pasted right the way down, and if I view the transparency, you can in fact see that that has now been applied. Now one additional effect I wish to apply here once again is glow. Okay, so I'm going to come back up to the effects, go down to stylize and choose glow once more. Again, make sure that we are using the A and B colors and that both colors are set to white. Okay, this gives us a nice burst of bright white. Let's go up to 100% there, and I'm going to change the threshold and radius values here as well. Let's take the threshold down to around 50%, somewhere around there. Okay, I'm going to take the radius value and push that up kind of to what we had before, around about 35 or so. And then the intensity, we can leave it as it is. If you want to go a little bit harsher in the center, maybe 1.1 or 1.2. But again, it's just that little bit of detail that adds this nice soft shine in the middle, which I think will work well when it's composited over our other clip. So let's go ahead and actually give that a try. I'm going to come back to our lower third design, make sure we're back at the beginning of our timeline, and come up to the project panel. And this is our Sparkle composition now set with all of the glow and the transparency in place, all in one easy to manage layer. So just click and drag this down, place it on top of everything else. There we can see that transparency, absolutely perfect. I'm just going to hit S for scale, and I'm going to bring this down to around 80% just to scale it down. It's really quite a large clip, but you know, it's one of those things you can very easily play with. And again, if you want to, you can turn on the safe areas and sort of roughly position this in the central area that we're going to use for our icon or graphic splash, whatever it's going to be that appears in this area. Now, what we do need is a mask for this, okay? I'm just going to isolate this layer and just zoom down. We've basically still got these hard edges that will appear all the way through if we don't do something about it. So the easiest way to do it is to apply a circular mask from that central point. So I'm going to come up here to the rectangular mask tool and come down to the ellipse tool, okay? Just going to zoom back up to 100%, put the cursor over the center here and hold down the Command key or the Control key on the PC to draw from the center, and the Shift key, which will give us our perfect circle. Okay, now this is something I really need to be doing at full screen. Okay, so what I'm going to do is bring this down to something I can see, so we know that we've got this already set in the center. Then I'm just going to hit the tilde key on the keyboard so I can view the entire composition in one go. All right, I'm going to go back to the main selection tool, double click the outside of the mask to bring up free transform, and again hold down Command and Shift or Control Shift on the PC, and now I can gauge exactly how big this needs to be. Now we don't want to take this right to the very edge because we're going to soften this. This really doesn't solve any problem. We've still got a hard edge. So I'm going to make sure that we come down to a certain size beyond which we can feather and then still not see the hard edge around the outside. Okay, so I'm just going to hit enter to say okay there, come back out of full screen mode, and then hit F on the keyboard to reveal mask 1's feather here in the timeline. That then allows us to go ahead and drag that up to a value that we think gives us a nice softness. So probably somewhere in the region, I don't know, maybe 200 pixels or something. You can really play with it as long as you don't see a hard edge appearing around there between your mask and your feather of the original edge of the composition. It's totally up to you what you wish to apply there. So, you know, make sure that you scrub a few frames. And in fact, you can see there as I scrub down the timeline, I am indeed seeing the soft edge. So it's up to you whether you either reduce the feather, okay, which will shorten the effect of the overall mask, or you can leave the feather as it is, double click the mask for free transform, and once again drag it down from the center. So you can basically combine those two techniques to isolate how much of the clip you want to see, how soft that edge is, and also make sure that you don't see any of the hard edges during your loop. So I think I'm just going to scale this up a little bit more and maybe drop the feather down to around 150. We'll go for some kind of intermediate value there, and that should probably do the trick. Now if I go ahead and turn off solo so we can see the original layers behind, I do want to affect how this blends with all of those elements. So once again I'm going to choose a blend mode, and I think in this case I'll go ahead and use add, so we get this wonderful contrast over the green and we get a nice sort of green softness to it as well. And then what I want to do is kind of punch a hole in the center of this, so we do at least see some of this original background through here, but in a moving form. So what best element to use for a mask than the object itself, just in a smaller version. Kind of gives us more of a halo type effect. So I'm just going to make sure I deselect so I haven't got the mask highlighted or accidentally duplicate anything else. Reselect the clip and then Command D or Control D to duplicate over the top of itself. The blend mode doesn't matter. What does matter is that the layer underneath, we come over here to the track mat and say use the layer above as a Luma inverted matte. Okay, if we do that, the current one will look like it disappears, but that's basically because we've got two elements exactly the same size, one masking out the other, so don't worry. Go to the first layer, bring up the scale controls and just drag this down, and now you'll see the effect. Get this really wonderful glow. I mean, even if you animated this would look fantastic. I'm going to bring it down to around 25%, somewhere around there, okay? But now as you scrub through, you'll see that you've got an animated sort of glow mask in the center, which just takes away this harsh sort of glow that was there originally and leaves us space to put more elements in. I just think it's one of those little techniques it's worth showing as we go through. So if I deselect that now, just scrub through a few frames, you can see I think that was worth doing. So if I zoom down again and look at the whole design, you can see that we've got various elements in place now, but we're not constrained to our lower third area, okay? We've got everything layered, Now what we need to do is isolate these into a specific area and maybe add a few more features that will make this look even better. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of the timeline and press Command Y or Control Y on the PC to bring up the new solid dialog box. And it doesn't matter what we name it, we just want to make sure that it's exactly the same size as our composition. So go ahead and click Make Comp Size, go ahead and click OK, and then make sure that this is dragged down below the two sparkle layers, because I don't want their transparency to be affected by any masks that we refine into this area of the guides, because these are now freeform. They can overlay transparently onto our broadcast footage underneath. Those guys are set. What we're going to do now is control the rest of these elements down here in the background by masks that we draw. All right. Now we're going to start out with a very easy rectangular mask and then constrain it into these areas. So come over here to the rectangle mask tool and simply double click it to apply a rectangular mask to exactly the same size as the layer. That's why it's also important that the solid was the same size as the composition. Now again, making sure that under the view menu our snap to guides is turned on, what we can do is double click on the outside of the mask to bring up free transform and drag this mask down until it snaps into both of those guides that we made earlier on. Okay, just going to zoom in there at 100%. So now we've refined sort of a black solid area that could be used as a mask, but we're going to take this one step further. I'm actually going to have two masks on here for a different effect. Now just to make it easy as we work through this, I'm going to come over here into the timeline, click on mask 1 and hit return just to be able to rename it, just like you do with a layer, and I'm going to call this one outer mask. Now whilst the mask is selected, I'm going to press Command D to duplicate, exactly the same as you would with a layer, but because we have a mask selected, we get a second mask. This one, the bottom one, again, I'm just going to select and hit return to rename and call this one inner mask, and then press Command T or Control T on the PC to bring up free transform, and then simply hold down Command or Control on the PC and drag one of those top points, and you'll see that we scale from the center again. And this is basically choosing an area inside which the design will be the full color that we have here in the background, and we're going to do something different with the area that's left in these two areas. Okay, so instead of drawing three separate masks, it's actually easier to draw two and have them perfectly centered on each other. All right, so with that set, just hit enter to say okay. I'm also going to come down here to the mask settings and make sure that our inner mask is set to subtract. All right, that basically takes the central area now and punches it out of the two outer ones, which means that if we now play around with different effects and settings inside here on the background, this central area will be left exactly as it is. Now I appreciate that might all sound just a little bit confusing given the steps that we've gone through, so let's go ahead and put it into practice and you'll see exactly why we did what we just did. I'm going to come over here into the timeline and make sure that for this black solid layer we come over and turn on the adjustment layer switch. Okay, so the layer now looks transparent, but basically what we've done is defined two areas, the top and the bottom bars, through which now any effects that we apply onto the layer will affect all of the elements underneath it. Okay, and we're going to do two very cool things here. We're going to adjust the color and also reverse the footage so we get the same clip but going backwards. It's another design element. I think it's very, very cool. So keeping the layer selected, let's go up to the effects, let's go down to color correction and go down and choose curves. Now in the curves dialog here, all I'm going to do is just drag down on the upper level here, and as you can see, as I do that and darken it down, you get an exact idea of why we drew those two masks, and it's an adjustment layer. It's applying the effect only through those two areas into everything that happens behind. Okay, very, very cool. What I'm going to do is one more thing. I'm going to go back to effects, go down to distort and come across way down the bottom to transform. Now this one's very cool because it allows you to adjust the basic geometric properties, if you like, of a clip, but without physically doing so. You're doing it through an effect, and especially when you're doing it through an adjustment layer like this in two very defined areas, it's actually really, really cool. What I'm going to do is turn off uniform scale, and I'm just going to scale the width to minus 100%. Okay, what we get now is an exact reversal. Okay, it's a mirror of what was happening. It's the same clip back to front. So now as I just scrub through a few frames, you can see that the clip is still playing. It's all in the same color. The layers are still layered, but we've got this wonderful flip back to front. And this is all done through an adjustment layer. There are no duplicated layers that you've had to flip back to front. And whilst all this is happening, our nice sort of glow over here on the left-hand side with the mask is still on top of everything else. So that's precisely why we created an adjustment layer, did the outer and inner mask, and subtracted it. It left a nice gap here in the center and made sure all the effects are applied top and bottom. So even though we have all of our graphic elements in these three areas, we've still got the top and bottom sections to get rid of, okay? Well, we can actually use the same shape to do that, and that's really why I went through this construction process, because it's very simple to duplicate something, make a couple of changes, and use it again. So just going to select something else, come back and select the solid, so we don't have any effects or masks highlighted at this point, and once again, Command D or Control D to duplicate it. Now, things will change because there are double effects being applied here. So the first thing I'm going to do is Shift Command E or Shift Control E on the PC to strip all of the effects off the layer, and make sure you come over here and turn off Adjustment Layer so we're back to just black bars. Hit the M key to show the masks, select the inner mask, and get rid of it. All we're left with now is the one original rectangle that defines the top and bottom sections of our overall lower third, okay? With that above everything else, we can now come over to the modes and go down and choose Stencil Alpha. That will use the alpha channel of this layer to cut a stencil through the rest of the design, everything below it. That's why our sparkles are on top. They stay exactly as they were. If we now look at the transparency, you can see nice soft blended edge over there and our nice transparent background defined by our rectangle right here, all done with just a couple of duplication steps. So now if I deselect everything and zoom down and even hide our guides, we can see that the lower third is essentially complete, and because we've got no build or overall transparency, this is ideally a 10-second loop right here. The first frame and last frames are 1 frame apart overall, and you could loop this indefinitely. So very cool in that scenario, but what we want to do is create an intro here. We want the lower third to build onto the screen using a couple of sort of scale and also linear transition effects. So once again, I'm just going to zoom up to 100%, go back to the beginning of the timeline, and basically the most important thing we need to animate is the bar that appears over here in the background. Ideally, I don't want the third to go all the way to the right hand side. I actually want it to sort of feather, maybe at an angle, so we still have transparency here and we could see our background clip on this side. Just adds another design element to it. Well, that can all be done using the layer that we've now got masking this entire section, okay? So come down here, black solid 2, that's our one that's set to a Stencil Alpha. If we go ahead and apply a linear transition to this, it will also apply a transition to all of the layers beneath it. So come over to the effects, let's go down to transition and come over and choose a linear white, and what I'll do is I'll just set this to around 50% so you can see exactly what's happening, okay? It's now 50% across and it's cut right down the middle of all the layers in the design. Now currently that 50% is coming from the right hand side, so I'm going to drag this round and bring it to around 240 degrees so we get this nice sloping angle here. So then if you adjust the value left and right, you can see exactly what it looks like. Just again, it takes away this linear effect to everything. If we put angles in, it just makes it a little bit more dynamic. Now we do want to animate this, so I'm going to make the transition 100%, which takes it all the way off the left hand side of the screen, and at 0 seconds in the timeline, I'm going to come over here and apply a keyframe for transition completion. Then I can come back down and drag out to, let's go for 1.5 seconds. This is all keyframe based, so it's easy to adjust if you want to, but 1.5 seconds down the timeline, we then choose how much of that bar we wish to be revealed, okay? I'm going to go for about 35%. If we just come over here, we can see that leaves us a little bit of room, and of course, we could come over here and choose a feather value. So as we drag this up, maybe 150 or so pixels, again, transparently, we now get this wonderful blend into our background clip, okay? Now, if I show the keyframes for that layer, they are linear, so that would give us actually quite a slow 1.5 second animation where it will just move linear and boom, just stop, okay? So what we do want to do is select that keyframe and use Shift F9 as your keyboard shortcut to ease in, all right, which will slow it down just a little bit. But then what I'm going to do is right click and go down and choose keyframe velocity. Now it's just off the bottom of my screen, but go ahead and choose keyframe velocity, and I'm going to set the influence of that keyframe to about 65%. Now what that means is it will accelerate the movement from left to right and really slow down over about the last second. So it is definitely weighting the animation on one side as opposed to the other, okay? So if I scrub back here, you'll see as I get to about 0.5 seconds in, we're almost completely done. We're over 50% of the way through, and then over that last second it will actually slow it down, and it just gives us this nice burst at the start where where the motion comes very quickly out of the left and then eases down to the right hand side. Okay, the nice thing about this as well is it gives you then a quicker introduction in which you can animate other elements over here. If you leave your timeline sort of linear and everything's very slow, then it takes forever for you to find a time for these to build, and it just seems as though an intro can be so lengthy. Really, a lower third intro doesn't need to be more than 1 to 1.5, even 2 seconds at the absolute maximum. You need a quick reveal, your information is on screen for 4 or 5 seconds, and then you can fade off or reverse all the keyframes if you wanted to. So definitely worth playing around with the keyframe velocity there, so you can adjust the speed in which the elements burst onto screen and then fade down into their final value. And so now that we've got those values adjusted, we can figure out where we then animate in the glow that we have over here on the left hand side. So if I just go back to the beginning of the timeline, I'm just going to use page down to go through our animation here. And I think round about 6 frames in is roughly where the green area in the background has reached far enough across to coincide with where the glow would start. Okay, so I'm going to say that 6 frames in, I'm just going to put a marker there on the timeline. That's where our animation explosion is going to start. And then I'm going to go, say, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames, half a second down. Okay, 15 frames down the timeline. This will be our point where the glow has then expanded to its full size. So what I'm going to do is select both of those sparkle layers. Remember, the mask and the layer underneath need to be animated at the same time. And making sure that both of their scale values are selected, I'm going to apply a keyframe for both because that's their resting position. Okay. If we now go back to marker 1, which is at 6 frames in, I can go ahead and change the value to 0 on both of them. Okay, and we get a very simple explode up and scale back to their original size. Now again, we can just select both of those and ease them in. If you want to, you can use the same adjust keyframe velocity, but in this case, I think it will actually work just at its usual default setting. All right, but again, you can see that nice quick burst of green on the left hand side allows us to introduce these elements earlier on, get the build out of the way, and use a nice slowdown to sort of ease that motion across the screen. So again, just sharing with you a few techniques here that are very useful when designing lower thirds. I think this will help overall. Now in essence, the design is complete at this point. If I just close everything up there and go back through the timeline, we can see everything that's now in place. Remember that if you decide that you wish to choose a new color here, depending on the footage that this is being composited over, or if you just need a totally different feel to this, all of the color in this design is essentially defined by this one background clip, the Cyber Journeys clip, because remember, we applied CC toner, we've got the green color here, all of these other elements, the darkness, the reflected color, even the blending of the white here, that's all done with layer blending and mask effects. Okay, so you change this master color here. If I go to the midtones and change to our blue, you'll see that the entire design adjusts accordingly. So just that one effect can define the entire color scope for a brand new lower third render. Okay, so just keep that in mind as you develop this further. So if I now show you a finished render, you can see that the wonderful transparency effects from both the feathered mask reveal of the bars and the custom alpha channels on the line elements highlight over here on the left, all ready to be perfectly composited over whichever clip you wish to apply the lower third to. So combine that with some simple text animation and reversed keyframes to wipe the design back off again, the lower third is complete and ready to go. So I hope you've enjoyed yet another cool Artbeats video tutorial and have, as always, learned some great new design and animation techniques along the way. This is Steve Holmes from Energy Design, and I'll see you again soon.